everyone. Welcome to today's presentation on the science of preventing burnout. My name is Lucas. This is Sahar. We're from the Becoming Superhuman team over at UC Berkeley. That's the name of our MBA class and our lab, which is really dedicated to helping busy professionals like you get their most important work done in less time with less stress. The topic for today is burnout. We're going to first dive into the history of burnout and what stress really is in the brain and the body. Then we'll dive into a really practical framework called the 3M framework for preventing burnout. And this works if you're thinking about yourself or you're thinking about your team. It really scales up no matter how many individuals we're talking about. So let's start first with the history of burnout. And if you can't already tell, we're going to be going pretty quickly. That's our style. We're both here in one place. So we're going to be going back and forth a lot. It will be very conversational today. In terms of the history of burnout, burnout was actually first coined back in the late 1970s at UC Berkeley. Dr. Christina Maslach was the first researcher who really had this hunch that burnout was not this soft and fluffy subjective concept that we experience when you're just having a tough day or a tough week. No, it's something different. It's something real, it's something measurable, and she wanted to study it and make sure that it was a legitimate subject of scientific inquiry. So she initially studied burnout amongst healthcare workers, people in the service industry who are notorious for helping other people and never making enough time to help themselves. And here's what she noticed with those who are burned out. In virtually every single case, she noticed three distinct patterns or trends, which now lay the foundation for how burnout is defined and how burnout is diagnosed and what to do when you are at risk of burnout. Here are the three trends. Number one, profound emotional exhaustion. She found that those who are burned out weren't just physically exhausted. They're not just tired, they're emotionally exhausted. They're apathetic. They don't care as much. They don't bring as much of themselves to the table. They're not smiling as much. They're not making jokes. So number one, emotional exhaustion. Number two, generalized negativity, sometimes called cynicism. This is when you just have a negative filter over everything in your day. You can't help but see what's missing, what didn't get done, what that person said that upset you, versus the positives, what did get done, what you're grateful for, what you're looking forward to tomorrow or this weekend. And when you have a cynical attitude, it makes life look much worse than it actually is because you're only seeing the negative. Number three, feelings of professional inefficacy. Dr. Maslach noticed that those who are on the verge of burnout or burning out feel, keyword feel there, professionally ineffective. And this is sometimes also called imposter syndrome, this feeling like you're about to be discovered as a fraud, like it's all going to come crashing down, like you can't keep up the pace anymore. Again, notice the word feeling. It's not that these people are professionally ineffective. People on the verge of burnout or who are burning out often show up just as much, if not more, than those who aren't burning out. They're putting in the hours, they're putting in the time, but they feel on the inside like it's going to come crashing down. So keep those in mind: exhaustion, cynicism, and feelings of professional inefficacy. If you've already taken the burnout risk index or you haven't yet taken it, those are going to be the three main factors that your burnout risk score will break down into. And that should help you identify which of the three you should focus on first. It's typically going to be exhaustion, but that's not necessarily the case. Now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the state of the burnout research. Dr. Maslach first studied it with healthcare workers, and it's since expanded to virtually every industry, virtually every company, and now the burnout research has advanced so much so that the World Health Organization in 2019 officially recognized burnout as an occupational syndrome. Dr. Maslach succeeded in elevating burnout to a subject of legitimate scientific inquiry. It's no longer this soft, fluffy concept. It's real, it's measurable, and this was actually before COVID, and unfortunately the data is even worse now. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the impact and the link between stress and burnout, because chronic stress, we know, is a leading indicator of burnout. So I want to take us back to prehistoric times, okay? As humans, we spent 99+% of our time on this earth living a certain way. And in terms of how we experience stress, this is how we would experience it. We'd be out walking, we'd be hunting or gathering or whatever we were doing, and we would see a lion, tiger, or a bear. And unless you have a long history of successfully fighting off lions, tigers, or bears, you're probably going to perceive that event, that stimulus, as stressful. Your stress response is going to kick in immediately. The stress response is designed to give you the energy to fight or flee. Stress is useful. Stress has a purpose. Chronic stress is different. has all sorts of negative impacts, but stress itself has a purpose to give you energy. I'm repeating it again. Now, we used to experience stress in what I call short and complete cycles. Let me explain. So you're out again, you're walking, you see that lion, stress response kicks in, right? That stress cycle has just started. What do? You run. Happens very fast. You get cortisol, you get adrenaline, you run, you get out of there. You find safety. You go back to your house, perhaps a friend's house. You get inside. What happens? Whew. Relief. You had stress, kick in, and then relief. Back down. Short and complete cycle. Stress serves its purpose, and then you go back to baseline. You're calm. You're relaxed again. That's how we used to experience stress. Nowadays, our lives are very different. They're fast-paced. We have so many notifications, meeting invites, communication, such that when you wake up, because most of us typically wake up to our phones, we immediately start getting exposed to different events, different notifications, different meeting invites that cause a little uptick in stress, that start those stress cycles. So you're going about your day and you get a little uptick in stress, little uptick in stress, little uptick in stress. But because of how fast-paced and how back-to-back our days are, we never have enough time to complete those cycles. This is where you get burnout. Burnout is the result of dozens and hundreds and thousands of uncompleted stress cycles, where small little events, each one is not enough to break any one person, but in aggregate, it's like death by 1,000 paper cuts. And over time, it causes some really serious and measurable negative effects and structural changes to the human brain.
So let's go ahead and dive into what some of those structural changes are, the studies that really led to that 2019 decision by the World Health Organization to categorize burnout as an occupational syndrome. Now, a set of researchers in 2014 started looking at the impact of burnout on regulating negative emotions. Now, in and of itself, the way I'm going to describe this study will not seem like much until the very end. In this particular study, they took a large sample of both folks that are burning out and burned out and folks that are not, otherwise they're healthy. And they presented them with both neutral and negative images. And now these negative images are rather violent images, and where we show these kinds of images to folks to actually elicit a pretty strong negative emotional response. Once we present these negative and violent images, we ask folks to regulate their emotional state. We're asking them to regulate out of that very negative state. Now, those who were diagnosed with burnout reported more difficulty modulating those strong negative emotional responses. So it's more difficult for them to regulate out of that negative state compared with those that were in fact healthy, okay? In and of itself, this particular study does not seem that interesting. You're reading it and you're like, okay, great. So folks who are burned out have a more difficult time regulating negative emotions. I could have guessed that. It doesn't seem that surprising. The thing is that the researchers found something that they didn't anticipate finding. They found out that the folks in the burnout group actually had a larger area of the human brain called the amygdala. Now, the amygdala is a typically walnut-sized area in the very center of the human brain. And this is a brain area that's responsible for fear and anxiety. This is the fear and stress center of the human brain. Now, the amygdala is kind of like the brain's alarm. It's the panic button inside of the human brain. Now, folks that were in the burnout group actually had larger amygdalas compared to those that were not burned out. Now, this is a scary part in the scientific world because you kind of are sitting there and you're looking at the data and you ask yourself, well, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Which one came first? Are people born with bigger amygdalas? And if you're born with a bigger amygdala, are you more likely to burn out? Or is it the case that those who burn out actually grow their amygdalas due to life experience? Due to all of the stress that you're experiencing over and over again, the death by 1,000 paper cuts that Lucas was describing before, is it possible that your amygdala can actually grow? Unfortunately, the answer to that question is yes. You can grow certain brain areas in response to chronic stress, and that is one of the hallmarks of burnout. You actually see larger and stronger amygdalas. Really, the brain is listening to us. The brain is saying, what would you like for me to get good at? What would you like to do on a daily basis? And when we're stressed out and panicking on a daily basis, the human brain goes, okay, I guess we're going to get better and stronger at stressing out. I'm going to get really good at it for you. No problem. So it actually starts to grow and make stronger the areas of the brain related to panic and anxiety and overwhelm. And it actually decreases the size of certain other brain areas. Fast forward the following year, 2015, in this other study, researchers were able to see a decrease in size of the frontal cortex. Now, the frontal cortex is an area right behind the forehead here inside of the human brain. This is an area of the brain that really makes humans human. This brain area is responsible for higher order cognitive functioning, really what allows us to make good decisions, think critically, and control everything from our emotions to our behavior, our cognitive control, and really, again, what makes humans human. This area of the brain actually decreases in size. It becomes weaker and less strong as we continue to burn out. So folks that are burned out actually have less control over their emotions. They have less control over their bodies. They feel less controlled over every single thing that they're thinking about. So not only do we see an increase in the size in the area of the brain related to stress, but we see a decrease in size in the areas of the brain related to controlling that stress in the first place, which is a very, very scary thing and definitely something that ideally we would avoid.
So these are some of the studies that led to the World Health Organization declaring burnout in 2019 as an occupational syndrome. So the obvious question now is, well, we're seeing these real structural changes to the brain. Can we reverse it? And the answer is yes, but recovery can take months. Again, burnout is not just a tough day or a tough week where you need a long weekend or a couple good nights of sleep to recover. It is a slow, gradual process that is much like physically injuring yourself. You've, for example, ran too long and too hard and now you've broken your foot. Yes, you can focus on the quality of your recovery. You can focus on getting the best doctor, not walking on it, making sure that you have a life of low stress. But you're still going to take a while for that injury to fully heal. It's the same with burnout. You push yourself too long and too hard, and you need to take, in some cases, up to months off to nurse yourself back to full health and performance, which is why we always say the best cure to burnout is prevention in the first place, which is why we're going to talk about the 3M framework. Because if you follow this framework, it only has 3 steps, you are virtually guaranteed to avoid burnout. And again, this works whether you're thinking about yourself or your team or any number of individuals. Here's how the 3M framework breaks down. 3M framework stands for 3 different types of breaks that all of us as knowledge workers should be taking on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. Let's start first with macro breaks. Every single month, you should be taking at least a half to a full day off. Every single week, you need meso breaks. You need 1 to 2 hours fully off, disconnected, time for yourself. And lastly, micro breaks. Every single day, you need on the order of minutes, small pockets of time where you're off, you're resting. We can't just go back to back to back, running like a machine. That's not how humans work. We need small pockets of off.
Now, you might be saying right now, wait a minute, we have weekends and, and especially now, depending on your region, I know that many folks over in Portugal are benefiting from the fact that we're setting boundaries for when our bosses and supervisors can actually contact us on a daily basis. So of course, yes, there are pockets of time when we're not working, but it's not enough to just not be working because you might still be thinking about work. When we're talking about the 3M framework, there's one critical component, and that is that you need to employ something called complete psychological detachment in order to actually have these breaks be effective. What do we mean by psychological attachment? It means that you need to not be thinking about anything that you're responsible for. That means that you are completely detached from all of the stresses of your personal life and your professional life. And when it's not a big ask, we're saying for a matter of minutes every single day, closing out those stress cycles. No matter how crazy your day was, at the end of your day, clearly end your day and say, I'm done, I've processed it, it's over. And for a couple of minutes, do something where you're not thinking about work. Every single week for 1 to 2 hours, do something where you're not thinking about work. You're psychologically fully detached. And every month you're taking a half day to a full day completely off the grid. Nobody can contact you. You don't even have your phone nearby, and you're fully psychologically detached. That is actually how you make sure that these breaks are actually effective.
So let's round out with some examples. Looking at macro breaks, Google does a phenomenal job of building in recharge days or recharge half days into their months. Consider taking a half day or a full day on a Friday, log off email, give people time off. That said, the way to make this work, the way to make it as effective as possible is to add some positive accountability. Don't trust that if you give people time off, they're going to rest and make the best use of that time. They might just start working on emails, meal prepping, doing backlog work. So have a Google Slides or a shared presentation where folks can contribute a photo or a video of what they did during that recharge day to add some positive accountability. If you're concerned about yourself, someone on your team, a colleague, a partner, whoever it is, one of the best things you can do to prevent burnout is to give people something that's immediately converted into time back. Provide food for a week, pay for a house cleaning, pay for something that will give you or that person time back. Now, looking at meso breaks here, we recommend 1 to 2 hours a week. That said, you can reduce that duration by taking what is called a nature pill. It's a cheesy term, but I know you're going to remember it. A nature pill basically just means you get out into nature, into a park, a forest, wherever there are trees. We have phenomenal research linking getting out into nature with stress reduction and burnout prevention. What's the minimum effective dose? Turns out it's only 20 minutes. Okay, so you don't have to take an entire day, a half day, a full day, 20 minutes once a week. Bonus points if you can get that up to 3 times a week. But otherwise, this is a phenomenally effective way to take a meso break.
Zooming into micro breaks every single day. Remember, for the matter of minutes, you need to psychologically detach from all of your life's stresses. Now, Amazon does a phenomenal job of integrating this into how they work. Most of the teams at Amazon begin their meetings in silence. At Google, many times this is called the mindful minute, and some teams use it and other teams don't. But this is something at the organizational level or the team level that you can totally use to make sure that you're injecting pockets of quiet and silence in the day, so folks can just close their eyes, have a couple of deep breaths, and then continue to carry on with their day so that they're closing out some of those stress cycles even throughout the day. But at the very least, end your day with closing out those stress cycles by doing something that's relaxing to you or something that is cognitively demanding, challenging, or interesting enough, new enough, so that it's impossible for you to keep thinking about the things that are on your mind and stressing you out and doing the thing at the same time. So for example, if you like to cook to relax, don't cook the same exact meal that you've done a million times. Do something different so that it's hard for you to keep thinking and worrying about all the stuff in your life while you're actually doing the cooking. Actually be there, be present with your activity or hobby as much as you can. If you like to exercise, do a different kind of workout so that you can't keep thinking and ruminating about everything that's stressing you out. You're actually present in your body and you're doing something that is good for you and actually getting your mind off of things. Now, with that, we wanted to thank everyone for joining us today to talk about not just the history of burnout and some of the research behind it, what's really going on in the brain and the body, but also the 3M framework. Ask yourself, which one of these 3 breaks do I need the most, and start integrating it into your life immediately. If you have questions, send us an email at susef@berkeley.edu, and someone from our team will go ahead and answer it. And if you want access to future research, you can use your phone's camera to scan this QR code and stay in touch with our lab so that we send out research summaries to you all. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.